Okay. So is this thing on? Yeah. But thank you for being here. For anybody that's not, this is their first time, maybe, my name is Christine Dixon. This is a free monthly gathering where I share tools and we share stories. The mentoring work that I do integrates hypnotherapy, IEMT, and experiential methods meant to help people move beyond insight and into real change. And we do that by targeting the conditional patterns at the moments that they arise. And that helps people move away from the automatic reactions that into something that's more intentional, self-directed, and creates lasting change. So how you think, communicate, and relate really matters. So today we are going to delve into empathy, sensitivity, and the relationship tension that being highly empathetic can create in our life. So, one of the things that I noticed over the years is that many highly empathetic people genuinely believe that everyone else is perceiving the world exactly the same way that they are. And when they don't, it can feel deeply hurtful, disconnecting, or even unsafe. Like, how can I trust this person when they can't see what's right in front of them? People who weren't tapped into the feelings and subtext of every person and conversation happening around them, it feels like the people that aren't like that are idiots. Like, that's how I felt. Like, how do you not see? Do you not see what that person just did, or what she just said, or how this played out, or the vibe of the room? Do you not get it? Um, it reminds me. It reminds me of a scene. There was a scene in a movie with Rita Wilson, and she was she was kind of complaining about her husband and talking about how when the toilet paper runs out, she'll go in the bathroom and the cardboard roll is there, and there's a roll of toilet paper sitting next to it, and how her husband didn't change the roll of toilet paper. And she's like, "Do you not see it? It's right there. How do you not see it?" And so I kind of feel like that is how I remember feeling about being around people that I didn't understand how they didn't get the subtext of what I felt was happening in a room, or they weren't able to, I don't know, read my mind about what I was feeling or what I wanted, because I thought everybody did that. And I think that it took a really long time for me to realize that that's not true. So when you're around people that maybe have a more regulated nervous system and haven't had to read people's minds or read rooms to be safe, it can seem like they're checked out, like they don't even know what's going on. And that can lead to problems. It can lead to problems in our communication. It can lead to problems in our relationships. Um, because being highly perceptive is typically a survival adaptation. Learning to read moods, tone shifts, energy, facial expressions. And it often develops from living in chaotic or emotionally inconsistent environments. So, the gift and the burden of heightened awareness can come from a lot of different ways. The empathy is not the problem, it's the unspoken expectations that create our suffering. the fact that we believe that other people should be able to read our minds like we feel like we can read their minds. And then we can come off as frustrated or condescending, or we can abandon the person, right? Like we can shut down. So today I want to talk about these areas because everything comes back to us, not because we're bad or wrong or broken or doing it wrong. It's because it's what you don't know, right? You know what they talk about, like whenever you're going into a new job or a new thing, it's like you don't know what you don't know. It's the same thing here. It's like so much of this, even for me, existed, and it was just so natural to me. Like it was just my way of viewing the world. I didn't see it as any different than how everybody else was experiencing the world. So I didn't have a lot of context for what other people might be thinking or truly thinking or feeling or processing. So let's talk a little bit about why highly empathetic people can often feel misunderstood, right? Um, we're often reading between the lines, right? We're trying to figure out what is the meaning under the meaning, what is the meaning under the words. We notice tone shifts instantly, emotional undercurrents. And then we can start anticipating reactions. We adapt quickly to other people's emotional states. These, there's nothing wrong with these. It's that what can happen is that they can lead to unconscious assumptions. So, kind of like, if I can feel this, why can't you? Or if I can feel this, everyone can feel this. Um, and many empathetic people confuse perception with communication. So, it could be emotional attunement and love, right? So, I feel loved when you can anticipate and know what I'm feeling and needing in any given moment. There's a piece that can feel like there's mind reading, right? Like if you should be able to read my mind. I actually fought for that with a friend once. Like, yeah, I really believe that if somebody really loved and cared about me, they would anticipate what I needed. And an important distinction is just because someone doesn't pick up on subtle cues does not automatically mean that they don't care, that they're selfish, or they're emotionally unavailable. They aren't intentionally trying to hurt you. Some people are simply operating differently. Their lens is different. And a lot of resentment gets born in the space between what we silently expect and what we never clearly communicate. So, and this is where I see a lot of ability for attention to develop is we don't always communicate what we're thinking, what we're feeling, what we would like to see, what we would like to experience. We don't communicate those things because they feel so incredibly vulnerable. And then there's this thought that's like, I shouldn't have to, right? Because I'm running around anticipating everybody else and doing my best to make everyone else feel seen, heard, appreciated. Uh, and so, why do I have to explain that I would like someone else to do the dishes if I cook, right? Why should I have to explain that it would be really nice to get a ride into work because it's raining and you're taking the car today? Like, there's so many different scenarios, and then what happens when we think that way or feel that way is that, well, we can withdraw, we can emotionally pull back, we can become passive aggressive, right? I someone was just telling me about a friend of theirs that came to stay over, and in the morning, the friend, she was getting up to go make coffee, and the friend said, "Are you really just going to leave without giving me a hug?" Now, what is the message underneath that, right? Are you really just going to leave without giving me a hug? It could sound nice, right? But here's when you have a request, right? Hey, good morning. Can I get a hug? Can I get a hug? I would really love a hug, right? Feels very different than, are you really going to get up and leave and not give me a hug? There is a subtext, there is an undertone there going, you're doing it wrong, right? Didn't you know I needed a hug? Didn't you get it? Like, and how you're almost rude or wrong. You're doing it like you should have. And it throws people off because they immediately go, oh no, right? Like, of course I'll give you a hug. But saying, are you really going to leave without giving me a hug? And saying, I would like a hug. The biggest difference is I would like a hug is way more vulnerable. So we project the vulnerability away from us, right? And we put it on, we just put it all on the other person. Like, aren't you going to? Every time you catch yourself saying, aren't you going to? Didn't you think about, you know, those are not healthy ways of expressing what we would like in a relationship. It puts the other person on the defensive or throws them off balance, and that doesn't really lead to it doesn't really lead to good communication and everyone feeling safe in communication, right? Because communication can get like landmines, right? You say this, I say that. Oh gosh, are they going to bring that thing up? Or um, I heard somebody say, uh, listening to a book, and the guy was describing someone that described their wife as historical. She's, we're always having these issues in communication. She's so historical. And he was like, are you trying to say hysterical? And he's like, no, historical. She brings up every single thing I've ever done wrong in my life every time we get into an argument. So, yeah, I mean, communication is something that we can all get better at. And a lot of it comes from our willingness to be vulnerable. So let's talk about the too sensitive dynamic, right? Because a lot of times when we are highly empathetic and sensitive, we get labeled as too sensitive, right? And there are nuances here, right? Sometimes too sensitive, being told that, it can be dismissive and an unhealthy way of communicating for the other person, right? But sometimes highly empathetic people create meaning from subtle things that other people never intended. Highly empathetic people create meaning from other things that others never intended, right? And the problem is that they believe their interpretation without asking questions. So if, how would we say this? So if your partner, if your partner uh, wants, I don't know, like wants a ride to work, right? And If your partner wants to ride to work and the way that they go about asking for that ride, let's see, is, hey, if you're not too busy with that art project you're working on, could you give me a ride to work? And then that goes through the filter that says, what the hell do they mean by that? My art project. What do you mean by my art project? Right? Is this somehow making fun of me or putting me down or minimizing what I'm doing? There are pieces that we pick up when the person never said it. Never said it. So we have to start questioning, what are the stories that we are creating outside of what the other person actually said? So what's helpful is to just respond to what they say. So if they're asking for a ride, then you answer, yes, I'd love to give you a ride. Or, I'm so sorry, my pottery's in the kiln and I will not be able to drive you. But next time, just give me a little more heads up and I'm always happy to take you, right? Let it be. Stop managing other people and their expectations and their feelings and their bad moods and all of it. Let them manage themselves. If they ask for help or if they want to talk, sure, you can be there, but we tend to jump in, even if it's not outwardly. Internally, we're running through the maze. We're running through the maze. And then we start adjusting our behavior based on what we think the other person thinks about us. And it's crazy making and it drains us. So we also tend to expect emotional precision from others, people that are not capable of that. That's not the way their brain and their nervous system was designed. They are not capable of emotional precision. We tend to assume intention where there may be none. The assumption that we've come up with of why someone said something or why someone did something, we assume that we know it. And then what's crazy is that then we act on our assumption without clarifying with the other person first, which then leaves them scrambling to catch up to understand what we're talking about. So people can begin to feel like they're walking on eggshells around us because it's not what they say, it's our interpretation of what they said that we respond to. So how do we get more clarity when this operating system exists within us that's telling us this is the reality? Don't listen to what the person's saying. I've got the real story. How do we delineate between our story that's getting made up and what the person actually said? And the only way to do that is to clarify, is to mirror, is to say back to the person, maybe like, hey, what I'm hearing you say is, are you saying you just need a ride to work, right? Are you saying that you would like me to sit next to you while we watch TV? Are you saying that you would like a hug this morning, right? Is that what you're saying? Those things help because Now we listen to what the other person is saying. Not our job to ever tell someone else that what we think they're trying to say, we believe that more than what the other person is saying. And there's a reason for that. Twofold, one for you and one for the other person, right? The reason is the only way that I'm going to be able to separate the stories that I'm used to creating from what the person said is to take them at their word and then ask questions for clarity. They could be giving every signal you can imagine, like body language, tone, everything that tells you that what words they're using, what they're actually saying is not indicative of everything that they're thinking and feeling, but that's not ours to pick up. We need to stay cleanly in our lane, right? And now I am going to take you at face value. So if you're not going to share with me whatever's underneath this that, has the different tone, the different body language, that's on you. I'm not picking up what you're not willing to share because I also am giving you dominion over yourself. So if you're unhappy, if you're frustrated, you're going to have to figure out how to use your words and how to use your ability to communicate to find a way to share that so that we can do it in a healthy way and have some type of understanding or resolution. And so each person is becoming more confident and build like I it's up to you. It's not up to the other person. Now, we can always make requests, right? We can always make requests. And a request is not a demand. So, a good example of a request was the drive me to work example, right? Which is, I'm so sorry. I would love to drive you to work. I feel bad I can't. Got my pottery in the kiln, right? And I say that because it's funny, because it could just be something you're playing around with, right? But next time, if you just let me know the night before, or as soon as you know, like maybe they didn't know, as soon as you know, if I can, I will totally, make arrangements so that I can help you with that. Do you see the difference? And look, a lot of us, we're not wrong. Okay. It doesn't mean that we're always wrong about what we're picking up. It's that what we don't have a lot of times is the humility to understand that what we're picking up isn't pure. It's going through our lens, it's going through all of our past experiences. And it's getting all of that is getting layered on top of it to create a story that may not be true. And then we can make the other person feel frustrated and like they're walking on eggshells because we respond to them through that story that we just built. And they don't know half the time what we're talking about. It's like the conversation just made a hard right and it doesn't always make sense. And then the tension starts there, right? The miscommunication, the attacks or defensiveness. So it's kind of a type of emotional storytelling. That lens creates a story and it's based on our emotional and nervous system experiences. But sensitivity is not weakness. This ability to sense and feel energy in other people, it's not weakness. It's not a negative. It's a positive. It's just no one ever taught us how to frame it in a way that's healthy. So unregulated sensitivity can distort communication. And then the sensitivity becomes suffering when every feeling becomes a fact. So now there's a whole racket going on in our heads, and we don't question it. We don't question it. So being deeply perceptive does not automatically make all of your interpretations accurate. And look, we all want to be right, right? We all want to be right. By the way, being right is one of the 5 losing strategies in relationships and communication. um, but we grew up being told that we had to be right, in school, at home, like you either have the right or the wrong answer. So being wrong leads to painful consequences. So we need to be right. And then instead of having the resilience to shift and take in more information and maybe change our position based on the information available, we tend to instead dig in and get bigger in our defense of our initial interpretation. And that breaks down communication and relationships too. So this leaning on this deep sense of empathy and intuition and connection actually can turn into self-abandonment. And that may sound strange, but what happens is that we can in our desire for connection, we end up believing all of the stories, and then we end up trying to fix it or communicate with the other person using that feeling of deep connection and what we are getting, like the information that we are parsing out from the interaction. So when we start to feel like the other person may not be aligned or quote unquote getting it, we may start over explaining, over accommodating, doing everything we can to try and prevent discomfort, managing other people's emotions. And then here we go into why don't we just ask questions? It seems like a pretty logical thing. Like if I have this thought that you just said something that, my spidey senses went, wait, what do they mean by that? Or what are they trying to say? Why don't we ask questions? And I think that comes up against our fear of confrontation. It comes up like questions, even a question can feel like confrontation. If you grew up in an environment with a very strong, dominant personality type, then what can happen is it could have been that that person was the only one that was allowed to dictate what reality was and what it wasn't. So if they come in a room and let's say everybody's snacking on a bowl of Cheetos and they're angry and they start screaming at everybody and maybe grab the bowl and take it and all of this. And it becomes a huge thing. Maybe the kids even start crying. It's just all this energy, all this craziness. But you're never allowed to ask why they were mad because we can't even acknowledge that their behavior was questionable. So you could have done nothing wrong at all, just kids sitting around eating some Cheetos. But now someone laid on top of that that you shouldn't have been doing this without any reason. And you have to take on their view of reality. Because if you don't, oh, you are really going to get it then. If you have your own experience or even the truth of what happened, if the truth is confrontational and will be perceived as an attack, then as adults, we go around and we don't ask questions. We don't ask for clarity because in our experience, that was drawing a sword. But then we live in all these stories that aren't always true, most often not true. And our relationships suffer, and we suffer. So we learn connection through managing other people. And staying attuned to their whims and emotional states feels like safety. And it probably was. I mean, these traits didn't come out of nowhere. That's how safety was created. But these do not work well for us as adults. And then a lot of times in these environments, our sense of worth was totally dictated upon our usefulness. What were we able to produce? Who were we able to make feel better? Who were we able to laugh? What chores were we able to do? Some people call themselves empathetic when what they really are is chronically hypervigilant. And usually for very understandable reasons. But it is exhausting. It is exhausting. And it builds resentment, and it makes us feel that we get taken for granted. Um, our relationships can become one-sided. So what does it look like to be empathetic from a healthier standpoint, right? Like how do we show up highly empathetic in a way that's more healthy for us and for the people who love us and are in our inner world, our inner circle? So we start to notice things without absorbing them. We communicate instead of assuming. We ask questions instead of interpreting. We allow others to be different. We stay connected to ourself and not allow ourselves to start embodying someone else's nervous system and look, I'm not saying that that's clean and perfect. I'm just saying having the intention and the awareness will help. We all co-regulate. So it's not like we won't be affected by people with very strong um, emotional reactions. But we also stop trying to mind read. So the communication shifts become, can I ask you a question about that? Can I clarify something with you? Here's what I need. One of my favorites is the story I'm creating is. The story I'm creating is. So I've given examples of that in the past. If you had a difficult conversation with someone or somebody did something that hurt your feelings, especially if it's similar to ways that you have been hurt before, whether you feel left out, um, that you feel unwanted, something somebody did made you feel unwanted, unappreciated. The idea being that you recognize that even though you have a strong feeling, that if you look at what was said and what was done, that's not necessarily how it played out. So you can say to the person, the story that I'm creating about the change in our plans or you not coming to town anymore, whatever, is that it's not a priority for you and that I'm boring and I know that this is me. So you have to own it, right? I know that this is just what I am creating. But if you sensed me being off or pulling back, or I just want you to know that that's why I just started creating this story of like, you didn't really want to come see me. Now we're not, because there's a fine line, right? Like if we tell people, when you said that, you made me feel rejected. You made me feel like I wasn't interesting enough or wanted. We're we're guilting and shaming the other person. We're putting the onus on them. And it takes away our personal power. It takes away our ability to regulate ourselves. We want to have the connection by being able to talk about it, but we have to own it. We own it, right? This is the story that started getting created in my mind. And it wasn't anything that you intentionally did or said. So if you sensed it or felt it, I just want you to know. And now we have nothing to defend. It's not exhausting. It's not heavy. Nothing to defend because nobody can tell you what you're thinking or what you're feeling, just like you can't really do that for other people. Mature relationships require communication, not emotional telepathy. And we typically don't learn that. We don't see it demonstrated around us. Because people can love you deeply and still not perceive the world the same way that you do. And it's important to separate perception from interpretation because that's the place that highly empathetic people get tangled up. What can also be true is just because we sense something doesn't mean we fully understand even what we're sensing. Again, it's going to get layered by our past experiences and our lens. And these shifts alone can dramatically change your relationships when you just start to become aware and remember my side of the street. Just stay in here. Don't try to manage other people. And if a story starts being created, let me start asking some questions. And look, if somebody's like, yeah, I said that, like, yeah, I was trying to be a jerk. Well, now you know, right? And then you can be like, well, you know, not cool. Not going to stand around for that, right? I'll talk to you when you chill out. So I want to teach just a couple things that can help, right? One of the core concepts around highly empathetic people are trying to accurately perceive energy, tension, and emotion, but then inaccurately assigning meaning to it, right? We can we can accurately read emotion, read tension, but then we inaccurately assign meaning to it based on our experience and lens. So, an example, you notice someone has a different tone, less enthusiasm, their facial expressions shift, silence. And instantly the mind creates, they're mad at me. I did something wrong. They don't care. I'm being rejected. Something bad is happening. The nervous system fills in the blanks. So I want you to take these 3 steps. The most important step 1, pause. You do not need to respond to anyone or anything right away. Maybe if you get pulled over, you might need to respond. But in your day to day life, right? We do not always need to respond. Sometimes it's so much better that we don't for us and them. Let me ask you a question. If you ask someone a question and they look at you thoughtfully and they go, let me think about that. Do you feel blown off or do you feel like they're really going to take their time and give me a thoughtful answer? Because sometimes we're also afraid of doing the pause. Let me think about that. Even having a quiet moment. If I say something to somebody and they get quiet and look like they're thinking about it, like I feel seen and heard. Like I don't feel rejected, but we kind of flip it around if we're the person that needs to pause. We're afraid because you need to have an answer. You need to have an answer. You don't need to have an answer. So pause. What did I actually observe? Only the facts. This is what you're focusing on, right? I messaged someone and they didn't respond for 5 hours. I was talking to someone and suddenly their tone changed. Not they're punishing me, they're abandoning me, they're upset. This is just what I noticed, right? Most suffering starts when the interpretation gets mistaken for fact. So we pause because we want to see what actually is being said and what meaning am I assigning to it so that we can separate the two. So ask yourself, what meaning am I assigning to this? They're angry. I disappointed them. I was unwanted. I was rejected. And all of these can be based on childhood conditioning, past relational wounds, nervous system patterns. So, what else? Step 3, what else can be true? And this is kind of similar to if anyone's familiar with Byron Katie's work when she says, is it true? So it could be that they got distracted, that something else came in to their, like they got a message. Um, they're overwhelmed right now. They might be conflict avoidant. They're completely unaware of how they came across. Again, if we need more information, we can ask questions, but we separate. So it's the situation, the thing that happens, right? That's just fact. We pause so that we can look at if we're creating any kind of story around what just happened. And then we ask ourselves, is there any other reason? Right? So instead of withdrawing or people pleasing or emotionally spiraling or becoming passive aggressive, we want to lean into curiosity, getting clarification. Hey, I noticed a shift and wanted to check in. Um, you know, can I ask can I ask if I have this right? Is this what you're saying? Is this what you mean? We don't want to expect others to be able to read our minds or silently resent them or emotionally exhaust ourselves. Empathy isn't mind reading. Emotional intelligence includes reality checking your interpretations. That's where the growth edge exists. So you're just so you to wrap this all up, your perception might be real. It's the meaning that you attach to it is where it gets muddy. And so since we can't know, we have to let other people have to stand on what they're willing to say and share and stay in our lane and ask questions and question our thought process. Because then everyone can stop walking on eggshells or doing this dance that's so exhausting. So, does anybody have any questions or any specific experiences that they've had that would be relevant to this conversation? Or did the conversation bring anything up in you? Because the one thing that I don't want you to take away from this is that there's something wrong with you, or that you've been doing it wrong, or that you've hurt people, or you're the bad guy. That is not what this is about. And that takes you away from the empowerment that this is meant to give you. So Elaine said that she tries to ask questions, but feel they are not well received, even though they do come from curiosity. Um, it becomes an art of how to ask a question without our emotional layering coming through as well. So if something hit us wrong, over time we learn how to ask a question that doesn't still carry the tinge of however we emotionally took that, right? So what I mean by that is put yourself, and this is what I do. I put myself in the other person's shoes. Remember that we hear criticism at a 10 times as strong as what somebody might be saying. So how would I ask a question where there's no way that it would trigger someone's defensive response, right? So it could be, I really do want to understand. And maybe in the past, I've struggled with this, but can you tell me more? Can you tell me more about what you're thinking or feeling right now? That doesn't feel like I wouldn't feel defensive about that. That would feel like something I could lean into. Yes. Um, so Jean says, I see so much of me and my spouse in this conversation. Not sure how to proceed as I want to tell him all the things. Is that to do or I do? Um, yes, I remember what you've shared before, Jean. And maybe one of the questions of like, is it true? Is maybe to change the perception of somebody who needs to take time before they want to respond as being someone who really wants to think about it, that really wants to have a well thought out response versus whatever's just on the top of their head, where it's kind of a more respectful, more being seen and heard as opposed to less. And then how do you feel if you think that, right? How do you feel if you think that the way your husband communicates is because he's trying to be good at it and be thoughtful? Yes, and Elaine said communication skills like this should be taught in schools. I need a cheat sheet. We'll see if I can get a cheat sheet together. Um, Bridget said a relationship counselor told me once to never ask why questions. That starting a question with the word why immediately triggers a need to defend. Yes, yes, exactly. Why did you, why is that your response? Like, it's saying, like, I don't get it. Like, this doesn't make sense. That's what the way it's received, right? So, the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes, sometimes, here's what's crazy. Sometimes the people who are the worst at that can be highly empathetic people. That may seem like a surprise, but the reason being is because we are so consumed by our own experience, our own feelings, our own um, wow, my brain wanted to say precipitations. It keeps going, precipitations. It's raining in your brain. Okay. I'm like, why can I get perceptions? Okay. Gosh. Anyway, we are so consumed by our perceptions and our energetic state that we don't have anything left to put ourselves in the other person's shoes from their perspective. Not it's different from trying to read them, right? Read their, but think about what they're thinking. It's more of, can you sense how you're coming off if you were across from you? And that's something that can be learned. You just practice, and you practice by pausing. You practice by going over what the person actually said and what story you're creating. And is that true? And what else could it possibly be than that? Because if there's other possibilities, you do not know. So Karen said, I also think there comes a time when you've done all of the verbal gymnastics to phrase a question as gently as possible, but the person you are working with is so deep in their unhealed self that they cannot see your inquiry as not threatening. You can't do another's work, and sometimes the other person just does want to meet you in your, wait, you can't do another's work, and sometimes the other person just does want to meet you in your curiosity, your gentle intention and love, or they can't see the path to do so. Okay, so sometimes other people want to, but they just don't have the ability to. Um, yes. And, as I've talked about before, what we're talking about now is about people. We all have our issues, right? We all have our stuff. When you get into pathological relationships where you're talking about people who struggle with things like narcissistic personality disorder, oppositional defiant disorder. Think about that one. Oppositional defiant disorder. My whole thing is about to be oppositional, no matter what. Um, Borderline personality disorder. When you have things that is someone that is motivated to always try to use communication as a way to gain power. And I'm going to talk about this more later. When they're trying to gain power because they feel so insecure and ineffectual and weak, so we're trying to gain power through communication, then sure, like none of these is going to help because they're not here for communication. They're here to win. And that's a completely different dynamic. If you're still here, bye, Juliet. Glad you could join us. Elaine says, when being the receiver of another's assessment of me, yes, the truth hurts, but I welcome it so I can try to be a better person. And that's really great, right? Like, but don't forget to ask questions even then, right? Because sometimes we can feel overwhelmed by getting an assessment, right? Ask the person, all right, so let's say somebody says, you know, you're just so rude. You always you just say whatever pops into your head, no matter how rude it might be, and it's hurtful, right? Okay. Well, you can say, I'm sorry. You could say whatever you want to say. You could take the moment to take that in. But what's really helpful is to say, how would you like me to bring things to you so that so that we don't have this disconnect? Like, how do you like, would you like me to not say it at all? Do you want me to um, put it in a note? Would you like me to start maybe we could come up with, like, if it may be a difficult conversation, we could start by saying, hey, can we have one of our meetings, right? Call them our meetings, our little meetings. Let me know when you're available. So it's not something that happens in the moment when there's emotion behind it. When you're available. And then everybody knows, oh, this is going to be a conversation where we have real talk, right? So we're much better at this when we're prepared. But asking questions, it's saying, like, you're right. The way I said that came out. And maybe the reason it was rude was because I had so much anxiety about saying it and trying to come up with all the different ways I could say it where it wouldn't be rude, that it just got fresh, like bottlenecked, and just flew out of my mouth. And then I said it in the worst way that I didn't want to say it. This is more of a practice than it is a science, right? So, and this is why I put together this community in the Path to Freedom practice, because we go deep into all of these things, and you really learn the tools and practice, because the practice is what gives your brain, as soon as you do something different than you did before, your brain lights up. New neural pathways start getting built. It starts expanding in such a big way, and so many more resources will become available for you in your relationships and your communication. But the intellectual knowing is only the first step. And the intellectual knowing is cool, but it doesn't change things. It's the taking action. And that's why the practice functions the way it does, because it's not a fire hose of information. It's bits of information that you go and practice 10 minutes a day, being aware, just watching what's going on around you, your responses, and then doing slow shifts so that you can build that foundation under you, meaning that you will have the ability and tools and integration to be able to handle difficult conversations or the stories that you tell yourself, all of it, and your relationships get deeper, and your energy does not drain in all of these ways that just not helpful for you or anyone. Yes. So Karen said that she thinks empaths can turn their lack of ability to connect with others how they need to into their own dysfunction and spiral into self-blame, right? So, but I want you to look at this in a certain way. When we spiral into guilt and self-blame. This isn't feeling some. Like it's normal to feel some, to go, oh wow, I do that. Yeah, I do that. Like wow. Yeah, you could feel like bad about that for a minute, but if you spiral into self-blame, then you've gone down into being again self-focused, right? And then it comes back to being all about you in a way that's not helpful. And then there's a term, we become emotionally indulgent. So then we indulge in the feelings of self-blame and it's all my fault. And it's all about me. And that takes us right back to where we're talking about not being, which is all focused on ourselves instead of just cleaning that up. They talk about that being, I don't like to call it egoic because it doesn't, nobody's doing it in a way that's like the way we think about being egoic. But they say that because we can think that that makes us a good person. We're a good person because we are spiraling into self-blame because we care so deeply, but we're making it all about us again. And we're going back in when what we're trying to do is to not live in that space that's so distorted, but live in the space that says, look, we all have our stuff, and I'm going to be accountable for the things I say and the things I do. And I'm going to expect the same of others. I'm going to treat them that way. Expect is a wrong word. I'm going to treat them that way, right? I don't have to expect it, but I'm going to treat them like, so if I have questions, I'll ask for clarity and I'll go by what they say. So Elaine said, my children have verbalized this about me. Is it the fact that they verbalized that you make things about you? Okay. So it's a difficult thing to explain so quickly at the end of this conversation, but I will do my best. Um, when other people are trying to communicate with us, it's best to be able to take them, what they're saying, and it's not what I'm trying to say. Bridget said, I found trying to perfectly phrase a question still finds me standing in the place where I'm trying to control the narrative. It's not exploratory, it's ego. I asked perfectly and they still, right. But the thing is that you do your best, right? You try to, because look, if we just go around and like if we say things, we don't look, everybody, it's their responsibility how they take things and if they want to get more information, if they take it wrong. But also we want to, like, communication is a two-way street, and the best way that you can communicate is to be able to figure out how I'm not going to trigger somebody else's defensiveness, because a lot of times we are carrying in our own story even if our words are different. So it's a way of being sure that we clean up our side of the street and go into it as cleanly as possible, but we don't carry their response, right? Like that isn't, if they respond badly, and I'm glad that we're having this conversation, if they respond in a way that we didn't intend, that's not our fault. It's not up to us. We did our best. right? They have the ability to ask questions. Because now they're in their story and we can't interrupt their story. We could say something like, well, maybe we should talk about this again another time or later. Maybe we should come back to this. Yes, Elaine, too sensitive. They know I'm trying to help, but they feel it ends up about me. And that's what I'm trying to express and share today is that sensitivity takes us out. It actually blocks connection with the people that we care about the most. And again, this is what we dive deeper into in the Path to Freedom practice because it takes a little bit more hands-on tools and day-to-day practice to be able to see this and to be able to start to shift it. And I'll tell you what, your family, they don't have the tools, I'm going to guess, because very few people have really good communication tools, but you have the opportunity to turn this whole thing around by you just working on you for you. Because when we work on ourselves, it's not in order, it can't be in order to change other people. But when we do work on ourselves and we do change, other people change too in regards to us. It's just how it works. Now, sometimes it's for the better and sometimes it's not, but I would imagine, you know, uh, again, that kind of dips back into the pathological relationships where when you change, you can be punished. This doesn't sound like that is the dynamic that you're in. But any last questions? Well, thank you guys. I really, really appreciate you being here and I appreciate all your questions. And we are going to continue in this vein, but I also want to bring in other scenarios that add other layers to this. Like when you're dealing with someone who is trying to gain power in communication and in relationships, because that adds a layer to it that has a whole other set of tools and ways of looking at it. So thank you for being here. I hope you have a lovely Memorial Day weekend if you're in the States. And everybody else, enjoy your May. And I'll see you in June. And last thing, if you have any other questions or want to reach out, you can reach me at on the path cht@gmail.com. All right. Bye, guys.